Hey, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On this episode we're looking at one of Cave's most renowned horizontal shoot-'em-ups that, much like Z-Blade, was a dream team of developers and publishers collaborating. We're checking out Progear, developed by Cave and published by Capcom, released into arcades in 2001. For a long time this was an arcade exclusive until getting an early web and mobile phone port in 2004, and eventually appearing on Capcom's plug-and-play home system in 2019 and the Aracde Stadium Collection in 2021, as this would be its first official console port. This is a ride of a shooter, and before we get much further, let's catch up on the story. In the Kingdom of Parts, a handful of elderly nobles figured out a way to become immortal and form a coalition known as the Motor Ruin Sages, which begins to enact a new world order under their control. While villages burn and government structure crumbles, 5 kids gather to take on the Sages with biplanes using semi-automatic propeller engines. The squad take off into a battle to reach the infamous lunar drill and defeat the Motor Ruin Sages one by one, hopefully we're bringing peace back to the kingdom. Gameplay-wise, you've got a 2D horizontal shoot-'em-up where you'll choose between 2 pilots, Ring and Bolt, and 3 possible gunners being Chain, Nail, and Rivet. Each pilot and gunner have different shot patterns and you can make for a few different combinations, though whichever duo you pick is who you've got through the game's 5 stages. You've got a main shot as well as a lock-on shot where your gunner will lock onto targets at the expense of slowing your craft down. You've also got a warhead you can fire forward at enemies, either clearing most enemies off screen or laying down heavy damage to larger enemies and bosses. Your shot power upgrades will help you clear enemies out that are in front of you, while your gunner will lock onto targets in all directions on screen. Your bombs will serve 2 main functions by clearing enemy bullets off screen, giving you a bit of breathing room, and laying down sustained damage on whatever is in the blast radius. You can stack several bombs in your reserves until you get shot down, bringing your stocks back down to 3. Fully upgraded weapons will lay the smack down, but just one hit and they scatter like the Dragon Balls. If you lose all your stocks, once you continue, upgrades will drop at their max, giving you a fighting chance to jump back in the action without getting immediately clapped. Progear comes out swinging from the second you take off, and enemies will be coming at you in droves. While the first level itself is challenging, the following stages only ratchet up the difficulty further. Bullets alongside numerous other projectiles will constantly fill the screen throughout each stage. You can grab upgrades for your ship and extra bombs, but when you're shot down, your upgrades will scatter across the screen. You can pick them back up, but you'll need to be quick as to not hit again trying to go for them. While doing damage with your bombs and your lock-on shot, you'll be able to get bonus points in the form of treasure that will drop from downed enemies or destroy vehicle parts. When enemies drop treasure, you can vacuum them up by hitting the lock-on button again, but keep in mind, if you lose all your stocks, your score will also be reset to 0, and with each continue will add a single point upon each respawn. Enemies will gang up on you quick here, and picking a solid gunner to go with your pilot is going to be something you'll pick up on over repeated plays, which is encouraged since each combination yields different offensive results. Alternating fire between your free aim and gunner will help with dodging quickly, while using combined fire will help you mow through most ops expeditiously. As you go through each stage, you'll notice that your gunner will have a few stat levels being active, safe, and lovely. These are affected by several parameters during play, like downing enemies and not getting shot down yourself, amongst several others that will also affect each possible ending. Boss encounters will start off challenging out the gate, and by the halfway point, bosses will have little to no problem smoking you like a pack of cools. Once you get to the 3rd boss, they will absolutely stomp you until you figure out how to avoid their bullet patterns, as well as figure out their movement as they take more damage and switch phases. The final encounter especially will just pummel you here, and is arguably one of the tougher battles in Cave developed shooters. If you thought Lady Gara was tough from Esperada, just wait till you see this one. While it's not impossible to 1cc Progear, this one is certainly going to make you work for it, even more so on that final battle that might even test some of the most seasoned shoot-'em-up players. Graphics wise, Progear runs on Capcom's CP System 2, which is the same graphics hardware that powered titles like Super Street Fighter 2, the Dungeons & Dragons arcade licensed beat-em-ups, Giga Wing, and the Street Fighter Alpha series, just to name a few. With Jinyu Inoue at the helm with the art direction, Progear is a good-looking shooter, despite the production diaries between Inoue and programmer Tsuneki Ikeda stating that the CP System 2 hardware felt underpowered and made development difficult compared to hardware they used for past Cave shooters. While that may have been a production hurdle, they still managed to pull off a stunning shoot-'em-up that doesn't buckle under pressure much, even when the screen is going absolutely mental. Through the game's 5 stages, you get some beautifully drawn sprite work, all in signature style that many would expect of Cave shooters. Environments are all highly detailed with a lot of parallax scrolling and background details, like bosses lurking in the tree line, only to later get in your face for encounters. The steampunk aesthetic is well executed here, and for being the first of few horizontal shooters developed by Cave, this one sets the bar fairly high. Bosses also dwarf your biplane and fill a good portion of the screen, and these encounters look sick. Each encounter begins with a splash image with a profile picture and name of each boss and their crafts. Once defeating each boss, they'll have a short bit of dialogue as their crafts plummet back to the surface in a fiery explosion, or several. As mentioned earlier, depending on pilot and gunner combinations, along with in-game performance, will unlock several possible endings, ranging from good to bad that will have some subtle to major twists. The war in the Kingdom of Parts does conclude through each one, but some will go into more detail about the pilot pilots than others depending on a few variables. So it does provide incentive to try different matches, though to get the best endings, you need to get nearly perfect runs and keep your interstage ratings with each gunner high. Sound-wise is where Progear does come under a bit of universal contention, considering the sound effects in the game are pretty solid in typical Cave form. Shot audio to downing enemies has got some satisfying feedback as you mow through the ops and bosses. The whir of your biplane engine stays a constant as you fly through each stage, along with the occasional ambience of what's happening through each stage, like when a flock of birds scatter as the boss comes into the frame. While there's no spoken dialogue, there is a good bit of it delivered by text. Boss death quotes can also be pretty funny at times here too. Composer Yukinori Kikuchi lays down the soundtrack here, and it has got some familiar vibes to previous Cave games while having a few differences. The soundtrack will feel similar to some Cave titles, but it's not quite as hype as other compositions. It's actually a fair bit moody in spots. It's interesting that it has an almost early SNK or even Capcom style approach to some of the music. The soundtrack to something like Ghost Pilots or 19XX games mainly come to mind here. The boss theme is pretty buck though, and the final boss theme is an ethereal epic that is intense, making that boss encounter have that extra bit of weight. Fun fact, while this doesn't really directly apply to the sound or music, one of my favorite grindcore bands, Discordance Axis, actually uses some of the gameplay footage from Progear for the music video for their song Ikaruga. Personally, I don't mind the soundtrack here, but I am aware it was a tipping point for some. It's hard to deny it's a bit different than past efforts, but it's got tunes that make sense for the depicted time frame and theme of a war-torn kingdom. While it may not be one of my favorite Cave soundtracks ever, it still has some good tunes in there despite the overall tonal shift. Progear is one of those games much like Zblade, which was the union of two Goliaths in regards to developers and publishers, where the developing team were known for making some often bonkers shoot-'em-up games. It's also one of those games that has a reputation for being difficult, as well as a marvel in hand-drawn sprite work. Ever since getting to play this the first time, it's become a game I find myself returning to every so often just to try to get a better score than last time. Considering this is the one Cave game I likely won't 1cc anytime soon, it's still a lot of fun to play and clear just to see what changes will occur with each set of variables. Progear gets an 8 out of 10 and comes recommended to shoot-'em-up fans as well as fans of Cave shooters, since this one is one of their most renowned titles next to some of the heavies in their catalog. It's got a somewhat steep difficulty curve, but with unlimited continues, you've got multiple chances to figure it all out. While you can't switch pilots mid-game, it does promote trying different combinations to get through the game's 5 stages and see the multiple endings as well as which combos work best for you. It's a challenging game, but it also stays fun even through those learning curves. And anyone that can get 1cc runs here, that's an incredible feat, especially on the back half of it. This is available on Capcom's Aracde Stadium Volume 1 along with Capcom's plug-and-play home system, and is featured on the Street Fighter II Champion Edition Arcade 1-Up cabinet. 2 of those 3 can be tough to track down these days, but the Aracde Stadium is the easiest way to play it along with a slew of other excellent Capcom arcade titles. If you're a fan of Cave shooters in general, this is certainly one to check out, and if you can find a board or working cabinet at your local area, definitely give it a try. Otherwise, play this one however you can if you're into horizontal shoot-'em-ups. And thank you if you made it this far into the video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries come up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.